Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Southern Outdoorsman Podcast. Today, we're coming at you with another outro. This time, we're covering the quick hitter episodes. I want to mention real quick, make sure you stick around to the end for the Q&A section. We're trying to add that to every single podcast. We got another question today that we're going to answer. We're going to try to do multiple questions, but we're recording a lot of these kind of back-to-back, so there hadn't been as many roll in so far. But y'all write in with your questions. Head on over to the website. There's a submission form over there that you can go take care of and have your question read on the show. So, Jacob, how you doing?
Doing well. Also, I was going to let y'all know, let me bump my audio up just a little bit. There you go. Listeners, you can also go over to YouTube and watch all these episodes on YouTube as well. So, just like this episode, it's on YouTube. Super excited. Dude, this episode was pretty fascinating. So, this is a quick hitter episode. This is a format I've been wanting to do for a while. And by the way, I still got my little cold, guys, so you can probably tell I'm sounding a little nasally, and I've got a cough drop in my mouth.
Yeah,
but
man. We subjected the listeners to 2 weeks of nasty.
You know, it is what
crud.
it is what it is. But it was fascinating getting all these different guys on from different parts of the country. Some guys from the Southeast, some from the Midwest. And here in a very short format, what's been some of the biggest factors for them to be successful. And it was really interesting. I think it's an episode, by the time this outro comes out, I'm sure it's going to have some really good feedback and probably some really interesting feedback from the listeners that we'll probably hear from in some reviews and everything. But it was just amazing at the Mobile Hunter Expo, like having all these guys in one place to be able to do the interviews. And the problem was there was a lot more people I wanted to get on. And me and Andrew wanted to get on for that episode that we just couldn't make it happen. Plus, it would have probably been a 4-hour episode. Would have had to be a 2-part episode.
Yeah, it was already an hour 40 minutes.
Yeah, which I didn't think it was going to be that long, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
So it's crazy, but there's so many different interesting factors between all the guys. One that I wanted to touch on early on, the very first interview we did was with Jacob Emery. And Jacob, one thing he talked about that really has helped him be more successful is the idea of focusing a ton on his access and getting into spots clean. Instead of taking the shortest route there, which may be like the most straightest lined walk, and he does a lot of boat access too, the kayak, but focusing on access of how to get into spots clean where deer aren't seeing you, they're not smelling you, and it may be the longer route to go in there, but when he typically does that, that's when he's having a lot of his success.
Yeah.
I think that's so critical. I mean, to me, that's one of my favorite points from really everybody. Like, there's some really good ones as well that we're going to go over, but I love that take on focusing on the access.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I thought that's actually was going to be the first thing that I brought up too, was the access. That's a common factor with a lot of guys that we talk to, but Jacob Emery actually ended up showing me where he's killed a couple bucks and the access that he took to get to those spots, and it was fascinating, honestly. Like how I don't really want to say what he was doing, but it was like going the extra mile, literally going the extra mile. Not even a figure of speech right here. Like he's literally doing everything that he can possibly do to get into a spot and not alert deer. And it goes back to what we talked about last week with Scott Seals and his access for those early season feed trees where he's coming through the pine thicket, and his access is kind of everything for that hunt too. And when you think about it, that's how it is for every single hunt every time you go. I mean, outside of maybe some rut hunts where maybe you're just catching a completely random cruiser buck, who's just kind of crazy with the rut. But outside of that, I mean, even on those hunts too, your access is everything. And that's something that I've said before, I haven't really paid much attention to in the past, and it's probably burned me a lot. Actually, when we talked about with Jacob Emery, we were talking about how when you get older and you get more responsibilities and stuff, you have to basically get better at hunting. And that is something that I look back on. A lot of those throwaway hunts that I talked about, it was access. Because first of all, I just didn't know, but second of all, it's like no big deal. Just keep going. Every day, whatever, however many times I was getting to go, it's like, oh, there's always tomorrow. Like I guess I just didn't hunt the right spot today, and I was never really thinking about like why I wasn't seeing anything. And looking back, that was totally one of the reasons why. Because looking back, I was hunting some pretty good areas. I think I'd kind of like to go back to some of them one day, but yeah, that was fun. That was a fun conversation with him. It's always fun having Jacob Emery around. Yeah,
he's a fun guy to hang out with and a good buddy of ours. And it's fascinating, just like a lot of the guys that are extremely successful put a huge emphasis on access. Getting in, but also getting out, because sometimes you don't kill that buck that very first trip. A great example, which y'all will hear on in a couple weeks, a episode we had with Jonathan Moreland from the expo, and also like some of his one of his seminars. You know, that huge deer he killed, that 180 plus inch buck he killed in Arkansas with his longbow, he killed on the sixth encounter with that buck. And access was huge for him as well, getting in and off those feed trees in order to be clean. When I say clean access, not disturbing any kind of the ground or anything that the deer are going to be traveling through, like coming in from a back door. And it works out so well, and you see that commonality between a lot of these guys, and even some of the other guys kind of mention access a little bit, but it's like access is everything. I kind of go back to think about your hunting club, and some of the guys in the hunting club, if they're going to shoot, if they're going to hunt on a food plot or in one of the big blinds, the shooting houses y'all have on the food plots, some of these dudes are driving
to the shooting house,
like pretty much parking the 4-wheeler or truck
behind it.
Yeah, and I'm like, that's
something.
I'm sure maybe it works for some people, but the thing is, there's no way, like there's gonna be those deer are gonna learn so quickly after a few seasons, or even really one season, especially the does,
after 2 weekends of gun season,
that truck pulling in and shutting off right next to the blind, or next to that food plot, next to that field, they're going to associate that sound with human presence. It's not like they're driving off and they're having somebody drop them off.
It's like trouble came to town.
Yeah, it's like, man, you're like, dude, you're shooting yourself in the foot, like big time. If there's deer close, now you could always have bucks wander in during the rut later in the morning that weren't within earshot of that spot, but especially for the does in that area and any bucks bedded close, like they're going to hear you coming.
Well, another thing that they do, by the way, is they will pull out in the evening and leave, like with 15 minutes shooting light left. I mean, right there at the end of the end, especially here in Alabama, we get a lot of gun hunting before the rut comes in. Gun season starts the third Saturday in November. Rut starts January 5, something like that.
On this area, yeah.
In this area, all that time, you're still hunting them on food patterns. How many times does a deer come out in a food plot with like 5 minutes left, or right there at dark, and they've been hanging in the woods right there for like 15 minutes, and then finally they pop out. Like if you've ever been hunting back in the woods, I've seen it before where they'll stand there, they'll browse, they'll sit there and look around, they'll check the wind, and then they go out in the food plot. It was like, man, when they're leaving and they're firing that truck up, the screwed up muffler, and they're leaving 5 minutes to prime time, those deer are standing like 20 yards off the edge of that food plot, like, oh, he's gone,
Yeah.
And then they'll go out there. Got him patterned, son. I mean, bad. But hey, you know what? I got to admit, though, I'm pretty bad about exiting. I'm not going to lie. I'm figuring out the access and stuff, but dude, like when it comes time for me to leave, I'm like, getting out of the woods, and I should be more cautious about it. I guess.
It also, to me, it comes down to, in that moment of time, like, are you planning on coming back to that area? Because I think a lot of it comes from like the public land side, where like, we've got tens of thousands of acres we can run around on, and if whatever we don't see exactly what we thought we were going to see on that hunt, and I'm like, I'm probably not going to come back in here. That's one thing. If it's your hunting club where you only have so many acres to work with, and it's a lot smaller property. Or if it's a spot that you really want to come back to, kind of going back to our SOA hunt last year after the whole debacle, the afternoon when we had the miss, I'm like, we got to come back in this spot, so we got to get out as clean as possible and quiet. And I think that is a huge consideration, because I think a lot of it is like how loud you're coming out at night. And when I mean loud, I'm not talking about like busting through brush and stuff. Like that's one thing. It's like clanking metal, just, I mean, to be honest, like talking and stuff like that. Like, I think, you have certain areas of the country, especially where there's a lot of coon hunting. Like, a lot of coon hunters will say, like, they're running dogs, they're talking, they're hooping and hollering at night and everything. And deer just kind of like lay there and just watch them.
Yeah.
But a lot of times they're hunting, it's 9, 10, 11 o'clock, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning.
1 o'clock in the morning, yeah.
And like those deer, it's been dark for so long, those deer are like pretty chilled out. And I think that they look at that darkness as like their own kind of cover, and they can kind of hear you. Maybe they can see you coming, but they're kind of holding tight. Versus like right at dark, like right when dark hits, I feel like deer are so on edge right there. And it goes back to Glenn Solomon's episode 116, where he was talking about especially going in the morning. He's like, deer act totally different, and I believe it was Glenn Solomon. Act totally different if you go in 2 hours before dark.
Yeah, it is.
They act completely different than if you go in 15 minutes before gray light. Like it is like they are almost like different animals.
They don't spook near as bad.
Don't spook nearly as bad. Even if they smell you a lot of times, they just kind of like ease off. They're not blown or doing anything crazy because it's still like the cover of darkness.
Yeah, you remember it wasn't that long after we interviewed him. We were up in North Alabama on that hunt we're doing again this year, and that was when me and you took the death march to the backside of that swamp, and we were walking back in there. I mean, like 3:30 or something.
Oh, we were walking past deer.
I mean, like
to go find more deer.
Yeah, we walked past quite a few deer. But that was my point. Like we had just interviewed him, and we were like shining all these deer in our headlamps, and they just like let us walk right by them.
Yeah, like,
within 40 yards.
Yeah, and I think one of them was a buck that we saw at a distance, and he kind of eased back away.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's not like they're blown or anything. So, anyways, that's just kind of comes back to the axis as well, and that's one reason. Dude, there's been so many times. Like there was a time last year, I got stuck in the stand. Or stuck in the tree because I had a buck just below me. He wasn't a shooter, but he was a really nice 3-year-old. I just knew that there was something a lot bigger there. And I already killed the 2 bucks. And actually, maybe I hadn't killed those deer yet. No, I hadn't killed those deer yet. Anyways, but I knew that there was a really good deer in the area, and he fed below me, like within like at the base of my tree and within 30 yards of me, up until like an hour after dark. And finally. There's a couple reasons why I sat in the sand. Number one, forgot my headlamp. Okay. Yeah. Actually, I didn't forget it. It was dead. So like there was no way to get down. And I had my phone, and I had a flashlight on my phone, but my phone was on like 8% battery, and I wasn't terribly far from the truck. But I'm like, I had to walk through some pretty gnarly stuff to get back, and I'm like, I need to save that light as much as possible. But that deer, I mean, dude, it was 30, 40 minutes after dark. Like our buddy Zach and them.
Yep.
I could hear them. I could see them with their flashlights walking back to the truck because I could see where they were like coming from. And I was like, and this buck, and I watched this buck the whole time. So this buck, that was kind of cool. I watched the buck below me, like clearly hear them coming. He could see their lights and stuff. And they got probably within maybe 150 yards of us, not crazy close, but we could see him. I could see him. The deer could definitely see him, the light. And he just kind of stood there and just kind of held his ground, like kind of looking at him, a little head bobbing. And the second they got to their truck, They started the trucks up, pulled out. He just went back to feeding. He was like, I'm just going to hang out. No big deal.
That's what I'm talking about. He's like, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah. And
out of here.
The problem was I had to get out of there. And finally, he like gets like 30, 40 yards from me. And I'm like, I got to start climbing down. Like, dude, I've been sitting in the tree. It's now like almost an hour after legal light. And I'm like just sitting there like under the starlights. I'm like, okay, well, I gotta get out at some point. I guess we're just going to bump this deer or whatever. Like, I'm not worried about killing him anyways. But the sign I found, there was a bigger deer in the area. I didn't want to bump him, but finally climbed down, and that deer let me. He was close. He was at the very most maybe 30 yards from me while I was climbing down, and I could see him out of the corner of my eye, just like a black blob down there. And like I was climbing down, I'd like look at him, and I was going so slow because I was in the climber at this point because I was trying to get really high up in this pine tree, and I was easing down, and he let me get to the ground and take the top part of my stick off before he decided to get out of there.
Did he like blow out of there?
No. He just like kind of he
just walked off.
Like, you could hear him like trotting off. He kind of went down through his little thick stuff. But I mean, he let me get to the ground.
Wow.
He was probably looking at me the whole time, like, "What is this?"
You probably like wrecked his world. He's like, "What?
Yeah,
What?
But again, I think if I would have done that right when in the legal light happened, he probably would have went out there tearing up the whole place and blowing the whole 9 yards. It was so long after the fact. And there's been situations like that before where like you get pinned down with deer and I'm like, I'm probably going to come back to this spot and I'm just going to sit there and wait. There's another spot. Great example. You and me, this was a while ago, hunting off like on a bench.
Okay.
Off a very specific feature.
I already know what you're talking about.
And we
had the bucks come by us?
Had the one buck come by us in the moonlight. And I think it was just one deer.
No, we saw 2 deer we saw 2 bucks that day.
But I'm saying it was after dark.
At dark.
Yeah, it was like we were sitting there, and it was probably only maybe 15 minutes after legal light, and I was like, hey, let's like take our time getting out of here because you had just seen a big deer in that area like the week beforehand.
Yeah.
And like we're like slowly like trying to like break our stuff down up in the tree, and all of a sudden I hear
unmistakable.
And I'm like, oh god, he's coming, dude. And for sure it was. You could kind of see because I was trying to take my binos and he got within 30 yards of us and there was some moonlight, but we're in the timber and I like took my binos up and I was looking and I'm like, you can tell it's a buck by the body and like you could kind of see somewhat of a frame, but there's no way to tell how big he was.
Yeah.
But just the way he acted coming in there, I'm like, that's probably that bigger buck that you saw
Yeah, because
previously.
I remember I looked at him through my binos because I could still just barely see through those, and he looked pretty big.
Yeah.
We got all fired up about it. That's actually a good example of, like, most of the time my exit strategy, because I do try to be careful about it if I know I'm coming back to a spot, but like when it gets dark, if I don't think there's a deer coming, I'm getting down and out as fast as I possibly can quietly. Like I'm not gonna throw my sticks out of the tree or something like that, which is one reason I'm really excited about one sticking, because in that night is a good example. Like we sat there for like 15 minutes.
Trying to pack the sticks up and crap quietly.
I mean, no, we were still in the tree.
But even when we got down, yeah. But
we didn't even start getting down till like way after legal light.
Yeah.
Which is not like that was all you were like, let's just hold on, let's wait. And I was like, okay, because I never do that, bro.
I'm notorious for it. I'm like, if I'm hunting with somebody, you can guarantee you're waiting on me at wherever we're meeting.
1,000%.
Because like I am taking my sweet time getting out and trying to be quiet with it. And so,
but that's a good example of why I don't like doing that.
Yeah, because you don't. Yeah.
Because then that buck ran into us, and I don't think that he saw us or smelled us, but we had more than enough time to like get down, ease over the hill, and hit the the road or wherever where we can walk quickly and like hit it and get out of there. And now we've lingered long enough that now he did run into us, and it's after dark and stuff like that. That's why I like with the one sticking, exactly like you're talking about. You get up there, you're like, all right, I'm done. Zip the bow down, freaking rappel out of there, gone.
Me gone.
You're just done. You're out of there.
Yeah.
You're not having to linger, because I just hate like lingering in the spot, because it's like if I'm hunting that spot, it's because I think deer are going to show up there, and usually I'm right, especially now that I'm starting to like kind of come into my own with it. And if they didn't show up before shooting light, they're dang sure showing up after shooting light. So it's like, let's get out of here. Let's not hang out in the area or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. And like that is a huge advantage, I think, with trying to do the one stick this year, because I just got mine back from Michael Pike. Got to meet Michael Pike again. Long time
He's
listeners.
alive.
Yeah, he's alive. A lot of listeners will remember Michael Pike. He used to do a ton of the podcasts with us, and it was like almost nearly every week was as a co-host with us.
Yep.
I got to go meet with him. He's about to do a whole Western tour this fall and like this summer for like ever how many months he's going to be traveling. He's going to go all around the West. But anyways, he's had my one stick for a while because I've never even used it. Like I bought it, never used it.
Yeah.
And it's one of those Catalyst outdoor ion sticks. They only made like 50 of them.
You got a collector's item.
Yeah, people are calling them like the unicorn because they're so hard to find.
Jacob will sign it and sell it to you for $1,500.
It's not actually. It's a little crazy off of what people are selling them for, but people are selling.
What are people selling them for? $600.
Greg Staggs was telling me like $600-$700, and they were new.
Wow.
They were new for they were new for $375 or something like that.
Yeah. I haven't even really looked. I've seen it once, but you brought it over.
It's 100% like one. If I remember right, it's 100% one piece. The whole thing is machined, like the whole thing.
Why'd they quit making them? Just so expensive?
I think they just went out. I don't know if they closed business or what, because they made some other sticks too. They made like a stick called like the Buffalo. That was a 100% machine stick.
Yeah.
They were like, yeah, it's crazy. But anyways.
Well, after I get my arrows, I'm getting the ultimate one stick.
Yep. So. But anyway, that is I think a huge advantage of when you're talking about access and getting out of a spot clean and quickly. That one stick is pretty freaking sweet, I think, for the rappelling aspect and getting out of the tree super fast and be able to get down on the ground, pack your crap up. You're not packing a bunch of sticks. You got one stick and your aider. You wrap it up, throw it on your backpack, and you run, and you're gone.
And you get out.
So like that will tremendously help me move quicker.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
In the dark.
Yeah. At least you own up to it. Yeah, Mary, you're waiting on Jacob no matter what. It doesn't matter if you gotta go eat, you gotta go whatever. I mean, whatever's going on. Like on the SOA hunt this year, we were like 2.5 hours late getting back to check our deer in.
Hey, listen, we kill stuff.
That was there. I called the biologist. We were supposed to be there at noon. It was like 11:58, and we were still on the bottom with 2 dead bucks.
And a broken game cart.
I was like, dude, I'm sorry, we ain't making it.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing about that hunt. They made you bring them out whole. And I'm like,
well, we got there and they were like, why didn't y'all gut them? I was like, well, thanks.
Well, yeah, from the conversation we had, like, they wanted guts and everything in them. Yep. I'm like, dude, like, I mean, they weren't giant, like, body deer or anything, but
thank God. Could you imagine if they were both like 210-pound deer? Oh my God,
we'd still be there.
Yeah, I would have died in that bottom.
I'm like, how do we get a truck really close with a winch line? And just start pulling?
Gosh, that sucked, man. So, that was a pretty terrible drag out. That was one of the worst ones I've had in a while, and they were with these like smaller body deer
and on a cart
we broke the freaking cart.
There was a time because there was so much deadfall we had to go over. I'm like, I think we could have freaking just drug them out one by one and just like,
Oh,
you
looking
grab an
back,
antler, I grab an antler, and just start pulling. And I think we could have done it quicker.
the freaking easiest thing to do would have been freaking string them up on a pole and
Yeah,
carry them
Paul
like that.
Patera style.
That's what we should have done.
Yeah.
Looking back, I don't know why we didn't do that.
Well-
There was plenty of dead crap laying around that probably would have held it up. A lot of dead cedars and stuff.
Maybe. Yeah, that would have been interesting. Hindsight's always 20/20.
Hindsight is 20.
but
Never
ba-
doing that again.
But back to the episode. Oh, we'll definitely do it again. What are you talking about?
I mean, we're gonna kill $2 again, but I ain't freaking using a janky Academy Outdoors freaking game cart that breaks. Part of that was our fault because we were idiots and tried to put both bucks on it. That didn't work.
I thought it would hold. I'm like, they're not that big. Like,
It made it 12 feet. Then it broke.
I'm like, it should hold, but I clearly did not.
Very distinct sound of like a pin popping or something.
Yeah,
like
and
that.
you're like, you looked and it like then it's like just drag like the back because a game cart kind of looks like a V, and like all of a sudden the back half of it's dragging on the ground. I'm like, son of a gun. I'm like, oh crap,
Oh,
like this sucks. Then we're like, oh crap, okay, go find ratchet straps, and like had it like I don't know, like tie crap up and freaking. I think we even used a
yeah, we used ratchet straps and we used our
pull
cam
rope.
buckles.
Yeah, cam buckle straps. Yeah.
Yep, from
And
the
like
tree
and like
stands.
had it cinched up. Yeah,
With
that's
a carabiner.
yeah, that
That
sucks.
was stupid.
Yeah.
Gosh, that was stupid.
But-
anyways, another thing I liked from this episode was we just talked about one sticking. I like talking one sticking with Greg. That was fun.
Mhm.
Pretty insightful. Like seeing his pack set up and him explaining how he does stuff. That really got my wheels turning. Which we've had a lot of folks write in saying we should try one sticking, and we met a couple listeners at the show. One guy who sent us that picture last year of him, he was like, I think we were talking about climbers, and he was like, hey, y'all really need to try this. And he sent us a picture of one of his setups where he's over this giant cutover. And, I mean, he was like way up this tree. And he's like, this is why I one stick. Well, I met that guy at the show and ended up talking to him about it.
The group of three guys? Was it one of those dudes?
I think it might have been.
Because he looked familiar, like one of the guys.
It might have been. I don't know, dude.
Okay.
There's so many people. But I talked to that guy who sent us that picture, but I remembered the picture distinctly.
Yeah.
And that actually, the one sticking thing actually ties into what another what?
No, I was gonna say with the one sticking thing.
Uh-huh.
The issue we've always ran on clear cuts. So one of the reasons, guys, we use climbers at certain times of the year during rifle season is because if we're hunting like clear cuts or like big openings like that, or like just dead timber, like I can't get high enough with four climbing sticks in order to like be able to see down into that stuff. So that's why we use climbers and try to find like a big pine tree. Typically it's a pine tree on the edge, and you have to climb up it and adjust the platform like literally 3 to 4 times. Like I had one down in South Alabama, and I had two 60-foot pull-up ropes. I've told this on the podcast. I had to tie them together to pull my stuff up. And I rough measured it off. It was like 43 feet to the platform that I was climbed up this pine tree. Had to adjust the platform about 4 times on the way up. Very sketchy. But I'm like, dude, I could have done that without even thinking about it and had to adjust anything just by using the one stick.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going up there. Like I feel like we're like now little one stick evangelists.
I don't know.
Greg Staggs can be all happy.
Yeah, we're gonna find out. I mean, we haven't started it yet, but I got the rope out there. I got like 50 feet of rope.
It makes so
Good
much
to go.
sense. It makes so much sense now. Like
Yeah, I mean, it does. And it ties into what another common thread with several of our guests was control what you can control, basically.
oh.
That I thought that was a good one.
Well, another thing I was going to say with the one stick, unlike a climber, like say there's like one of those trees on the edge of the clear cut that you want to hunt,
Oh.
instead of like having to have a clean straight tree, you could get in a tree with a ton of limbs, even with the one stick, and still get 35, 40 feet up. And I'm like, that is amazing. Like, dude, that's it.
I immediately thought of like 3 areas where that would really come
Yeah,
in handy.
because there's been areas I'm like, dude, I can't get a climber in here, and I can't get high enough with my 4 sticks.
There's
or
some
whatever.
spots at the club like that.
Oh, dude.
You know where I'm talking about, probably. But there's a
probably.
couple spots at the club that, man, that last hunt of the year that me and you did
Mm-hmm.
down in the river bottom. Because
Well,
I looked
down in the river.
not the river bottom, but the creek bottom where it's all mulch down there, where you hunted basically the clear
I
cut.
found a white oak I climbed really high with the climber, but
I couldn't get in the tree I actually wanted to get in. It's one of those situations where there's like one tree that is like perfect, and you're like, that's the one. But there was too many limbs on it.
Yeah.
Couldn't cut them. and I had to end up getting in a tree like 25 yards away. And that was the only straight one.
But if you had the one stick.
But if I had the one stick, I'd have shot up that bad boy. So we're going to try it this year.
Yeah.
Going to try it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Greg Staggs, that was fun talking to him again. Because you've never met Greg before.
I've never met him in person. We've had him on the podcast 3 times at least. Something like that. Never met. That's the beauty of the Mobile Hunters Expo, baby.
Yeah.
That's why you should go to the Mobile Hunters Expo for sure.
What was your thoughts on some of the things that Hunter Hogan brought up in his episode, talking about like the idea of I talked to him a little bit about the competition archery side, but the idea about like if I remember,
talked a little bit about observation sits.
Well, it's like observation sits, but like truly trying to like work your way into a spot and not like guess. Not his hunting style is very different from what we deal with because he's in the Midwest, hunts a lot of states in the Midwest. I guess the only southern state he hunts, and Andrew won't classify as southern, is Kentucky. But it's the whole idea of like he loves to climb super high, and he is so much taller than I thought he was in person.
Oh yeah,
like dude is built like a beanpole. I mean, that dude can climb like nobody's business. That's the reason why with like 4 sticks he can get. I think he's talking about getting 4 sticks like 36 to 40 feet with 4 sticks with an aider, like a single step aider on it.
That's insane.
But it makes sense because he can hang them up 9.5 feet high.
Yeah.
And then make that jump, make like a 3-foot jump up into the platform. I mean, it's crazy. But the whole observation sits, I think, is just kind of fascinating. And also, kind of focusing on putting yourself in situations where you can truly kind of get an idea of what's going on. The problem is in the Southeast is so thick. And, it's kind of contradicts what some other guy said. Like, some guys we've had on the podcast, like, if you can see past 30 yards, that's potentially too open. But there's other areas where I can see it being a super, it would work really good, especially around, clear cuts, power lines, stuff where you can see for a really long ways, but you've got to climb pretty high up in order to see, like, over that next little ridge or across that little valley or whatever. Yep. And you need to have the opportunity to be able to get high and truly be able to watch a lot of that stuff at once. And then you see the deer movement and then figure out how you need to reposition for another hunt and put yourself in a better position following up on it.
Yeah. And I asked him if he does observation sits in the timber, and he's like, yeah, absolutely. Scott said he'll do observation sits. But,
the way Scott classifies the observation sit, he's like, you're going in to kill that joker. But if he doesn't show up on that feature and maybe he's just another 60 yards away hitting another tree you can put eyes on, maybe you can't make a shot, but you can figure out what you want to do.
Unless you're Hunter Hogan.
Absolutely.
60 yards, no problemo.
Dude, yeah, that's like shooting for you and me at 20 or maybe 15, 10, 5, I don't know, point blank.
Blind bailing it.
Yeah. But the observation sits, I think, is just kind of fascinating. I think, especially in some areas, I look at it, an observation where I think observation sits would work amazing is big, wide open river bottom. Yeah. You got a ton of features. Like, you got a couple hot features. You sit on one of those, but you can still maybe see like 80 to 100 yards, maybe 150 yards, maybe 200 yards in some of those spots. But you have some thick stuff, and you can truly sit there and really watch what the deer do, how they travel through that stuff, and then kind of make a adjustment to be able to go in there and put yourself in, like on the X.
Yeah. That's an interesting subject. I've actually talked about doing what you just said on power lines and stuff, especially if I have someone asking me about going and hunting like does or something. They're like, I want to go kill a deer. And you have like a 3-day gun hunt to do it. I'm always like, go sit on a power line on a really high spot where you can see really far with a gun.
Well, okay, keep going.
And if you see a deer, like, in range, shoot it. If you see a deer too far, then adjust as needed. There's some places that, on a place around here that we've hunted in the past, where that's pretty much how I found that bench spot where we saw those bucks. You get up in a spot where you can see really, really far, like over a mile, and you can see various hillsides if it's hill country, and then you just sit there. If you see deer, like, okay, they're 3 ridges down. I've seen 3 deer cross there. Okay, well, either I'm going to get up right now and move down there, or I'm going to tomorrow I'm coming in here, I'm going to set up right there where I'm going to have a 100-yard shot or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's just a very fast, very easy way to like get started, I guess, doing an observation sit in a place where there's probably not very many opportunities. Unless you're going to go climb up a tree and watch a giant cutover, that you can't shoot the entire expanse of, and potentially try to see some deer in that, which would be extremely difficult. But I mean, that's an easy way because you don't have to get in a tree or anything.
Yeah.
You just sit on the ground on your butt.
But if you do get elevated on those spots, you can see so much more. Because I hunted a spot like that last year, where I shot that bobcat. If I would have sat on the ground where those does popped out, you would have never seen those does.
Man, I was looking at that spot on the map again today. I was like,
oh, let me tell you. Oh, it's gonna be
December.
Listen,
it's going down.
Listen.
It's going down.
Stacking some trucks in there, dude.
We're going to go stack some bodies. We're going to get Scott to go back in there with
us. And 1,500 listeners, too, probably. But yeah, gosh. No, but again, that spot, there was one tree I could climb, and I had the climber with me because I knew I'd walked in there, and there's a couple trees you could get in. And I'm like, I think I can get a climber in there, like, no problem. You got a climber in, and now if I would have had if I could have got up another 10, if I could get up another 10,
game
15,
changer.
Dude, if I could get up another 10, 15 feet, dude.
Because you couldn't see all the way to the very, very bottom.
No, I couldn't.
That's probably where he was.
That's what I'm saying. And if I could get up another 10, 15 feet, and I kind of look down in there, dude.
You'd be in good shape.
And another thing, talking about the observation sits, like dirt with a rifle, you have to be very. I always just like archery. And I'm not a great archery shot at all, but I am very, very confident. I shoot rifles a ton at distance at the farm, and I feel extremely confident with my setup. And everybody's different.
Do you do it a ton?
I have. Yeah, I have.
I don't know. When's the last time you went and did it? It's been a little while, hadn't it?
I think May. I took it down there with Anthony. We shot the smokeless.
Okay.
But with everything, I am extremely confident in my setup at distance, and go down there and we can shoot down there to 450 yards, and every condition is different. But I'll say this: it also depends on the situation, because some people can't shoot a rifle past 100 yards for whatever reason. They just can't do it. And then others, they practice a lot, and in a good situation, we have a good rest and everything, and not offhand shooting. Some guys are able to shoot quite a bit further. But last year, I had a situation in Arkansas when we were hunting, and I had at least two shooters, and might have been a third shooter in there. They're kind of all popping up, it's kind of like a whack-a-mole, yeah, in a CRP, in some CRP, and it was such an off angle, and they were well within killing distance for me. They were they were 240 yards to maybe 300. I could not get stable in that little tree. I was in a tiny little water oak.
Yeah.
That was probably at chest height. When I was climbed up the tree, I was probably 16 feet up that tree. It was probably only maybe 8 inches in diameter, and I could not get stable enough in there to be able to shoot.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because I wanted to talk about that same thing. When I missed that buck 4 times, it was pretty similar for me. Now, 100%, I'm chalking that up to just buck fever, bad decisions. But at the same time, part of that, one reason that you heard me rustling on the microphone so much and I panicked was I couldn't get steady just because of how I was leaning in the saddle. And so I've actually done this one time a while back, but I'm going to do it again. I'm just going to go to the club, and I'm going to do it when I'm practicing the one stick. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to bring my freaking 22, and I'm going to climb up in a tree and just shoot out of the saddle with the 22 as practice with the rifle. And I'm going to practice shooting at those odd angles, because that's such a unique situation that you're not going to go to the gun range, and freaking tie up to the edge of a bench or whatever and hang off of it and try to shoot.
Sure, you could.
I guess you could. You get some
range master.
I don't know, man. The range master at our local range would come down there and kick you in the nuts or something if you did that.
One of them was pretty cool. I think he'd be okay with it if you told him what you were doing, if it wasn't too busy.
But when I first got a saddle, I did that, and it was quite helpful, actually. You could do the same thing, just dry firing too, actually. But if you wanted to actually shoot some stuff, go set some targets up, shoot a 22 out of there. You're not burning $85 worth of ammo. It's something kind of simple and easy. But that wraps back into the control what you can control thing. And that kind of spoke to me from 2 different angles, because like you, I'm very, very confident with my rifle. I had some instances last year that were unfortunate, but I mean, I'm still, it didn't really shake my confidence at all with the rifle. If a deer steps out, and especially if I've got a good rest, I'm very confident with that thing. But with the bow, that the archery equipment, I'm not as confident with at all. And we've talked about it before. We kind of bow hunt to get to gun season around here. We both really enjoy gun hunting, but I think we're gonna go a little bit harder at the bow hunting this year. We're gonna do like a big early season hunt, and we're gonna try to make it happen. And part of that for me is getting back very confident with my archery equipment, because I used to be really confident with it, and then I've gotten out of it a little bit, to be honest. I mean, I bow hunt. I killed 2 deer with a bow last year, but it's not a priority anymore. So I'm gonna try to make it more of a priority this year. I'm gonna try to get more proficient with that and control that, because I can control it. The awkward angles out of the saddle with the rifle, I'm going to try to control that. I'm going to practice that. And the one sticking, that's going to be another thing. And then also your entry, your exit, all the things that we're talking about, it's all stuff you can control. And that's something that came up with, I don't even know how many of them, but several of the people that we talked to, and a lot of the people that we talked to off the record too. It came up time and time again, is there's a certain level of unpredictability with deer where you don't know what they're going to do, but you can 100% control what you do. So you better make sure that you don't screw it up when the deer actually does the thing that you want him to do.
Now, but by the time we're doing this recording, have you gone back and listened to the whole interview?
I mean, outside of editing it, no.
Okay. So one I wanted to bring up, and we're going to do a full-length episode with him. It's a past guest, Carl Brown from South Carolina.
Oh yeah, I haven't really heard Carl's.
So he was on episode. It's one. Actually, I'm gonna look it up real quick, because it's a really good episode from like how he hunts in like the coastal plain area of South Carolina. But Carl, when I asked him like what was one of the biggest factors for you to be like had the consistent success that you've had in your home state of South Carolina, he typically kills, like they get $5 a year in South Carolina. He typically is pretty close to hitting $5 every year. Okay. And a lot of them public land. He does hunt some private land too, like urban areas that he has access to, just from like clients of his. But with that, the factor that he brought up, he's like one of the biggest factors for him and where he hunts is the art of going in blind. And always moving around, always going to the new locations. He's like, and he gave an example in the podcast. He's like, we go into one spot, we may see 20 deer.
Yep.
Okay. If I go back to the same spot the next day or even like a week later, I'll see half that. Next time I go in there, I'll see half of that. He's like, every time I go back in there, I just see less and less deer versus the first time I go in there.
I've had the opposite be true of that, though. Just a caveat.
Yeah, it can. But I'm saying where he's at and what he's personally seen, that's been like, his factor. Yeah. And he's hunting extremely thick. I mean, just some really crazy stuff, to be honest.
Yeah.
Kind of this coastal plain area with tons of palmettos. He's like, we were talking about, he's on another episode that's going to come out here in a couple weeks. And he was talking about, or the guys that were sitting on the panel with us talking about finding scrapes and rubs and all this buck hunting. He's like, how are you guys doing that? He's like, I can't. He's like, you don't find that where I'm at typically, especially in the palmettos, because the palmettos go from your ankles all the way up to above your head. So when you're walking through, you can't see where your feet are at, and you typically can't find rubs very easily, and you really typically find scrapes very easily in that stuff either.
Yeah, that's some crazy stuff. Yeah. I feel like there could be a remnant population of like velociraptors in there that we don't know about. It's so thick and like tropical. He's hunting like a freaking rainforest.
Yeah. So in the episode that Carl was on originally, that was back in 2020. So that's episode 184. It's Hunting Unpatternable Bucks with Carl Brown. It's a really good episode. He's got a great gator story in there, like a really good story. Like one of the best stories ever told on the podcast, where he almost got snatched up by a gator. And
I was telling someone, I was talking to my father-in-law, because he helped us out with dinner that night and everything, like cooking for everybody, and we were talking about all the different guys, and he said something about Carl. I was like, Carl's an interesting cat, man. You would not believe the kind of crap he does, because he's like, yeah, we'll go up there and we'll just swim across those ponds to get to those dikes to hunt them. I'm like, you're swimming across those like alligator infested ponds. And he's like, yeah, I mean, it's no big deal. I'm like, you're freaking nuts.
Well,
dude.
it's like if you live in that kind of environment, you just kind of get numb to it all.
Yeah, you get used to it. It's kind of like us with cottonmouths. I mean, I'll look out for them, but I don't really worry about them.
Yeah, no,
unless I see a big old girthy one. And then I'm like,
if it's got shoulders on it,
I'm kind of wheezy for the rest of the walk. I'm like,
yeah. But just his thought about bouncing around to different spots, I thought was kind of interesting. And that's something I've always loved to do. Like, just love like going to new spots. You just go off the map and like, once you have some confidence and you're finding success in certain areas, you kind of can like look at a map like, man, there ought to be some deer here. Yeah, there ought to be deer here. And he just does that and does it really, really well. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then also another thing that I thought was interesting was the application of trail camera usage with some of these guys, specifically like Rusty Johnson and his son Rustin Johnson, who were both on the podcast. In like their trail camera strategy, which we did a whole episode with those guys as well, which I'll look that episode up real quick. But like their success of just finding patterns with bucks, like using certain areas with trail camera, it kind of reminds me a little bit of like Michael Perry, except they're checking their trail cameras throughout the season. I'm sure they have some that they leave and sit the whole year.
Yeah.
But they're just kind of like finding those patterns of where these bucks are really like to be, and they go in there and then they hunt them. And I know Rusty's pretty successful going in there and hunting and killing, some of those target bucks. I know Rustin's had some same success as well. And it's fascinating kind of seeing all that kind of play out, with all the different guys.
Yeah, one thing that Rustin talks about is being loud when you go check your cameras, especially this time of year. Like, just go in, don't be afraid to be talking, break sticks. I mean, like, be loud and kind of let them know that you're coming, so they can get out of there, and you're not gonna like turn them inside out by sneaking up on them.
Yep.
I actually did that with my stepdad the other day when we were out throwing some cameras up at the hunting club. People might have seen a reel on our Instagram and Facebook where we found this creek crossing. We ended up throwing a camera on it. We checked that camera the other day and we got a couple bucks on it. Nothing crazy, but there's 2 bucks on there that are gonna end up being like some kind of rack buck. I don't know when they drop antlers around here, but like I know that they're like a month behind like Shane's deer because they rut over a month before. So I'm kind of looking at where Shane's deer are at, and then I'm looking at where these deer are at. I'm like trying to figure out how much more they're going to grow. But one of them is starting to kind of branch out, and he looks like he's going to be a decent buck. Like something that I might be interested in shooting, but something that Mike would definitely shoot.
Yeah.
So we're excited to be finding those. But that's what me and him did. We were splashing through the creek. We had our fishing rods. We were talking. We were laughing, not being quiet at all. And I was telling him that, especially after talking to Rusty and Rustin about it, but I've kind of wondered this my whole life walking through the woods. Is like when you spook a deer, is it better to be loud and let them just kind of ease off and just avoid you where they kind of know where you're at the whole time? Or is it better to be sneaking through there and all of a sudden he's like 12 feet away on the other side of that log and you lock eyes at the same time and he's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, no.
And he freaking blows out of there 100 miles an hour. I'm like, that probably wasn't good. Probably just traumatized that deer.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And that episode I was talking about with Rusty and Rustin, where we're talking about their trail cam strategy, which is really interesting. That's episode 396, systematically find the giants with Rustin and Rusty Johnson. But it's interesting when you get those guys on and kind of hear some of their different strategies. But really, one other guy that we had Joe Miles on the podcast along with Rendell Eric. And, Rendell talked a lot about his stuff from, like, the Iowa perspective. Because, again, he used to live in Tennessee. He moved up to Iowa about, 10 years ago. And he's been hunting up there for a while. And he was a huge help for me the last couple of times I've gone to Iowa. But with Joe, that's the first time Joe's been on the podcast. And Joe's from South Carolina. He's always consistently killing bucks. He kills them. His secondary season opens in August. He typically, last couple of years, he's always killed a velvet buck, and typically gets, majority, if not all of his other bucks throughout the year, always killing really nice mature deer. And his part was, like, one of the big factors for him in order to be successful, he's like, I'm never consent. What's the word?
You can do it.
He's never, God, my mind's gone.
Oh, you lost it.
I'm trying to, it's on the tip of my tongue.
What's the gist of it?
Like, he's never okay with just what he has.
Never complacent.
Never complacent. That's the word.
Got it.
Never complacent.
Golly, what would you do without me?
Yeah, I don't know. But he's never complacent with the properties he has, because he hunts a lot of private farms, and some are really small acres. Like he talked about, one's like 40 acres, like off the side of his office, and others are quite a bit bigger than that. But he's never complacent with it, where he's like, at any point one of those farms could get sold, because there's a lot of, like, it seems like a lot of them, like, he's not leasing them, he's just like knocking on doors and getting permission.
Yeah.
So he's like always consistently trying to find more and more properties, because you never know when something's going to get taken away from you. Like, it gets sold, they lease hunting rights, something happens, and I thought that was kind of interesting too. And again, that could be from a couple different perspectives. If you're in a hunting club, you probably really don't have to worry about it because you're going to probably just going to be in one club. But if you're leasing property, you never know. Like maybe you just can't afford the lease price as it goes up every year. Or if you're leasing it through a private individual and they go to sell it, like so many things could happen. Or they come clear cut your property and you don't like hunting clear cuts, which happens all the time during deer season. Always kind of looking at the next best thing, and especially from a public land perspective, you never know what could happen with that ground that you're hunting on, especially like what we do in Alabama, where some of our public land is getting sold off because it's through these crazy stupid leases that the state did with timber companies. So we're losing a lot of public land. So like constantly be like looking at other opportunities and where you can find other opportunities to be able to go hunt, whether it's public land, whether you're private knocking door access, whether you're leasing stuff, whatever. And I thought that was a really good point that really I guess it's kind of overlooked a lot of times.
Yeah, stack the deck in your favor. Even if you have a pretty good property, you don't know what could be on that next property. I mean, that's what we do. I mean, this property down the road from us that we hunt, I used to think it was trash, and now that we're a little older, a little bit better, I realize that it's actually really good. But we still go to Arkansas. We still go to Georgia. We still go to North Alabama. We're still going to these different areas where there's a higher potential, and we're learning about areas that we can go back to one day. I mean, like where we're hunting in Arkansas this year, you got a year of history with at that place now, so we're stacking the deck in our favor there.
Yep.
So I'm excited.
Yeah,
I'm
for
really
sure.
excited.
Awesome. Well, let's get over to some
Let's
Q&A.
hit the Q&A, baby. I want to give a shout out to Sam Carmichael. We met you at the Mobile Hunters Expo. You gave us a little bit of advice on fixing our boat, and the boat is fixed.
Yeah.
I think. I'm pretty sure it is.
We haven't tested it yet.
We got to go crank that sucker up, but I'm 99% sure we fixed that sucker. So, anyways.
So real quick, so for this Q&A section, we're trying to do these Q&As, answering some of the listener questions on these breakdown episodes, these outro episodes. Andrew, how can guys submit their Q&A questions so we can use them on future episodes?
Then go to the southernoutdoorsman.com. There's a Q&A page, so you'll see it. Go to the website. You'll see the Q&A page. You go there and fill it out. Fill out a Q&A form, and that's the easiest way to do it. You can also drop comments on the YouTube videos, and we will include questions from there. So comment on the YouTube video of this podcast, or write in with a Q&A at the website. Either one works. All right. What's up, guys? My name is Matthew Brady, and I'm from Central West Alabama, and I plan on heading up to Illinois in November and have a few questions.
You said Illinois.
Is that not right?
Illinois. Yeah.
We spelled it Illinois.
I know, but that's a fun. Anyway, sorry. Also,
that's how we say it in Alabama. So get over it.
Okay, go on. Sorry.
I have a few questions. I'm a long-time listener and enjoy your content. The first time I went to Illinois, I tagged out on a 120-inch 8-point on my second sit. It was my first public land deer, my first archery buck, and my first time hunting out of a tree saddle.
Cool.
What a stud. I'm headed up there again this year and looking to target a 140-inch buck. I'm going to be using kayak access from a ramp. The creek flows up through a quote-unquote hard-to-access by foot area surrounded by a swamp on one side and ag/timber on the other. The creek has oxbows, there's no elevation changes, and the timber is mostly consisting of the same big hardwoods. What would you look for going in on the first day? Crossings, transitions, pinches, scrapes, swamp borders. Also, would you worry much about thermals? Thanks. Dude, congrats on the 120-inch 8-point on your first. I mean, that's legit.
Awesome. That's awesome.
That's super legit. Jacob, what's your opinion on this? 140-inch deer.
I'd go back and listen to episode 129, DIYing for Public Land Giants with Greg Staggs. Talk about interior edges. And I think we're going to have him on a podcast again and talk about it in more detail.
Man, yeah.
But, like, in that timber, there's going to be some kind of interior edge. Like, it could be just all wide open, but there's more than likely you're going to have some dead timber. If it floods, you're going to have some dead timber in there that's going to open up sunlight. So you're going to have, like, thicker edges inside that the deer probably going to be using. And then also kind of going off what Jeremy Aaron's talked about last couple times we've had him on the podcast from Do It Yourself Hunter on YouTube, the idea of like hunting around like some of the slough heads and everything like that, and finding those pinches that, if a deer is coming from like one peninsula through and he wants to go around a slough to say the main body of some timber, they could swim the slough. Very easily could swim the slough if they want to, but there's a good chance he's probably going to go around the head of that slough, and that would be a really good pinch point to kind of check out. And also, to go in day one and spot check that stuff, looking for that, looking around the water, what's going to pinch deer in around the water, where you have those land masses to either side of that water. So that slough kind of goes straight up. An example, slough comes from the south straight to the north, stops at the north, and you have land on the east and west side of that slough. So if deer want to go from east or west side of that slough, they're going to go around the head of that slough on the north side. And with thermals, and I'm going to take a couple of different statements here, and I'll let you roll it.
Yeah.
With thermals, the closer you hunt to that water, even though you're in flat land, the thermals are going to pull down to that water. And then if you hear a lot of guys in flat land talk about that thermal pull towards the sun, both in the mornings and then also in the evenings if there's no wind, taking that in consideration with your stand placement around that water, where if you're hunting in the evening, if there's some way to have that water kind of towards the sun and kind of towards that downwind side, all the thermals, all the wind, everything's going to be pulled out towards that water, and you should be able to get away with a lot in that spot.
Yeah. Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you just said. We got a couple river bottom hunts this year that sound pretty similar to the setting that you described. And what I'm doing is I'm just trying to go back to the basics with it and look at the habitat and where the deer are going to be, where the edge is at, like you just talked about with Greg Staggs. So at the end of the day, if you can find an area that has some diversity in it, it sounds like you got a swamp, timber, agriculture, there's probably some other smaller variations within that, maybe this is a cattail swamp and then this is more of some other kind of swamp over here. Just whatever, dead trees like you talked about. Look at all those different edges, find where all those edges come together, and then go in there and look and see where the pinch points are within that.
You're looking for the bottlenecks in that kind of country. I mean, another guy that's done really well in that kind of habitat's Jacob Emery. We just did a...
Actually, this sets up exactly like a spot Emery showed me on the map.
Yeah. We just did an episode with Jacob, I think it was this spring, talking about kind of the water axis and kayak axis.
Yeah, it was.
And, this is a huge point of what he's doing in going and finding pinch points between water and also those open fields. If any of that water or whatever gets close to that field, within even 100 yards, that's going to pinch him down between the wide open field that's probably going to be tilled in by the time you're hunting and that water. And then depending on if there's anything else in that gap, whether it's down trees, something else that can tighten those deer down even more so. That's where it would be a really good spot.
I got a good example of this in South Alabama. There was a place that I used to hunt in college, and I was hunting there with my buddy Mark Turner, who's been on the podcast a couple times, and he killed a doe. It's actually the video on our YouTube channel of Mark showing how to cut up a doe, how to pack out a deer. It was that doe. It was in that spot. We probably show a little bit of the habitat if you want to go look at that video on our channel, but I didn't realize how much open fields and stuff funneled deer because I didn't come from that kind of background, hunting that kind of place. But that place was an example of that, where you had two fields. There's a little SMZ between them, basically, and then you had open water. And where those two fields came to the corners right before they got to the open water, those deer were swinging around the backside of those fields, and you had a pinch where they were having to walk basically a 100-yard gap between the edge of the water and the edge of the open field. And then on top of that, though, because we're bow hunting, there was 2 or 3 big fallen trees, and Mark was hunting 20 yards off the nose of one of those fallen trees, and those does funneled right around the front side of that fallen tree. So you're kind of looking for the spot in the spot. You're looking for the funnel in the funnel in some of that as well. So, is there a fallen tree? Is there a big root ball? Is there, a random little, deep spot of water in there? Like a little old slough or something like that. And that's how you take those bigger pinch points and narrow them down to make them a little bit more huntable with archery equipment. So yeah, definitely go listen to the Greg Staggs episode though. That's a great one for that.
Yep.
The interior edges, that's it. Because if there is a big swamp right there and the deer are out in that swamp and you got some kind of edge coming out of it, actually in this Monday's episode I described a spot like that with Greg, where we have a spot we're gonna hunt. There's some marshes in it. There's some beaver dams going across those marshes, and that's your edge within the edge, and the deer are just
by the way,
tunneling out of it.
By the way, the details we gave on that scouting episode, had a listener message me exactly where we were at.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wait, what, the scouting episode?
Where the boat didn't work?
No. Who was it?
I'll tell you later.
Dang. What did we say?
Too much.
Gah! Like the spot we scouted or the boat ramp?
Pretty much there. Yeah, that area.
Okay. Hey, bro.
Yeah,
if you're listening, you want to hunt with us in January?
Yeah, you got to be more secretive, dude.
Oh, what tipped him off? Did he say?
Everything.
Okay, that's not helpful.
I mean, I'll tell you afterwards.
Oh
yeah.
my God.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Hey, we got some smart listeners, man.
You're gonna have that. I mean, that's the reality of having a hunting podcast.
That's what I'm saying. We're gonna have 1,500 guys hunting with us down there. it's gonna be a pumpkin fest. It's gonna be fun. No, but no, he had some really good tips though. Really good tips because he's hunting down there a good bit.
Okay. Well, shoot, let's have him in camp.
Okay.
I mean, daggone.
Okay.
He's already gonna be there anyways, I guess. I don't think we have any new reviews.
I think we
read them.
I think we had some older. I think there was a couple that we just didn't read. Some of those. But yeah, anyways, guys. So like we just did Q&As. Again, you go to the website, submit that Q&A form. I'm sure we can probably put in the show notes. I know last week's outro, I put in the show notes, so that Q&A links there, so you can go and listen to it or go click on it and get to it.
All right, I'll read this one and then we'll read you can read the next one.
Okay.
This one is from Pines and Tines. First and last podcast, 5 stars. This was the first hunting podcast I ever listened to nearly 4 years ago, and it's the last one I will ever need. It has definitely played a huge role for helping me to continue to improve and effectively hunt these elusive bucks here in East Texas. Keep up the great work, boys, and see you in Chattanooga. So, it doesn't have your name on here, but hopefully we got to meet you in Chattanooga, stranger from the thing. So
Awesome.
appreciate that review, by the way, and I appreciate you listening from East Texas.
Dude.
I'd love to find more guests from East Texas.
Okay.
I would love.
If this is this guy's actual name, this is one of the most epic names in the world.
Oh yeah,
It's definitely not, but I love his name.
it could be.
So by the way, we are reading Apple Podcasts reviews. So if you listen to Apple, which like per our analytics, like 70+% of you guys listen on Apple and Apple products. So if you go leave us a 5-star written review on there, we'll try to read some of those on some of the future breakdown episodes or outro episodes. So this is from Timber Maverick. Okay, freaking love that name.
I dig it.
I love that handle.
I get down with that.
Yeah. 5-star review, most relatable podcast. This is hands down the best podcast for hunting public. The guests share a lifetime of knowledge and vast array of tactics. Whether you are just beginning to hunt or have hunted for a lifetime, this podcast is for you. I listen most every day. It's informative, entertaining, and funny.
Awesome. Appreciate that. Hey, by the way, if you're Pines and Tines, hit us up. I want to know if we met you in Chattanooga. So hopefully we did.
Yep.
But yeah, send us a message. I'm curious about who that is. Anyways, all right. I guess that wraps it up. You got anything else?
No. I was gonna say, make sure y'all tune in for Monday's episode. Again, that we are working on putting out some absolute banger episodes with extra juice. Okay.
Yep.
Scott Seal says, and our buddy, oh my God,
gosh, bro. Brain don't work anymore.
What?
Well, we got some old school Southern outdoorsmen. I'm talking about like long episodes coming out.
Yeah, well,
So get back to the 2.5 hour ones.
Yeah, we've kind of changed some format, guys. So you're going to start seeing some longer episodes where we just try to get in as much detail as possible for you guys. So you have, more to listen to throughout the week. We actually had quite a few requests to start going back to, not leaving a whole bunch on the bone. And definitely some of the episodes coming out are very similar to that. So,
Yep.
Anyways, Josh Hawley. That's who was the one that started the juice.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
So, anyways, but there's some really, really good episodes coming out, guys. So make sure you tune in on Monday for that. And again, just remember, all these podcasts are also going to be on YouTube. So you can head over to YouTube. You can watch all these episodes. I'm sure you'll thoroughly enjoy it. We appreciate the engagement over there, the comments, the likes. Everything's been fantastic so far.
Yeah.
And, guys, y'all have a great weekend. We'll catch you back here for this coming Monday's episode from the Southern Outdoorsman Podcast.